Thank you very much, David. Such a great honor to be here. I'll just put on my video for a few seconds so that everyone knows who's speaking. And then I'll put it off just for better bandwidth. But as you can see, I have a really good background. That's why I sit in Action's office. I'm not there right now, I'm in the house, of course, but I always like people to see who's speaking and then I'll put it off. But really great to be here with everybody. And I like what you mentioned at the beginning, that young people have the potential to really make a difference on matters development, but most times we are left on the margins of policy making decisions, of processes. And so people really don't get to see the true value and the true meaning of young people's potential. What I know for sure is that at this time, in the midst of this crisis of COVID-19 and the fact that countries are grappling with the possibility of a second wave, for us to really build back better and effectively achieve health equity and social inclusion, which is a key priority of this summit, and to truly achieve the 2030 agenda, we need this paradigm shift where leadership is really in the power of adolescents and youth, where young people take on the mantle and decide what's good, not just for the youth, but for the development of this country and the continent, because we are the majority of the population. We cannot have other people deciding for us. So in my keynote address, I want to look at 4 things and really emphasize on these 4 issues. Hopefully you can get to delve deeper on these key issues during the entire summit. First of all, within my work as coordinating Wired Youth in Action, which most of you may be aware of, we are a youth-led, youth-driven movement. We currently have a network of over 700 youth-led organizations in Kenya, and we've now scaled up to working with young people in 14 countries. I'll be talking about that later. But what I've realized then from my first-hand experience in really driving change is that when youth are at the fore in policy making, then there's clear sustainable change that can be achieved. I have seen youth at global level advocating and contributing for UN policies when we're discussing the UHC 2030 asks last year. I remember youth from around the globe really put out strong calls for meaningful youth engagement in the UHC processes, which is aligned to what we are discussing today. I have seen youth at grassroots level who've been able to champion for policies to include priorities of sexual and reproductive health, gender equality. We have been working with youth, in Nairobi, in Kilifi, in Samburu. I have seen the power of having young people seated at the table, talking with decision makers and really advocating for what's important to them. So the first thing that I want to highlight is that young people and of course policymakers, I don't know that we have decision makers in the summit today, but we really need to invest in spaces that enable youth to be at the fore of decision making. And I always say that youth should not just be seen as beneficiaries. We always need to be seen as partners. So we're not just beneficiaries or victims of circumstances. People should take away the negative viewpoint of looking at young people. Youth should be seen as partners. We need to invest in these spaces that enable young people to be seated at the table as partners, to formulate health policies, to contribute to health benefits package for those of you who are in the UHC space. And young people should be meaningfully engaged, not just as tokenism, but acknowledging that when youth are at the table, policy processes and outcomes are much better, that we have sustainable processes when youth are at the table and giving their contribution. And for the young people, I always say that we are never too young to make a difference. And I've written this in one of my blogs. For youth leadership, it's not about age, it's about capabilities. When you look at historical Pan-African leaders, like the late Tom Mboya, in his late 20s, he led an entire trade union movement across Africa. It wasn't about his age, it was about his capabilities. When you look at modern day digital activism being led by students, in South Africa, you saw the one hashtag fees must fall. If you look at what's happening in Uganda right now, it's the young people who are at the fore of making a difference. It's not about their age, it's about capabilities. So as young people, we need to acknowledge that we are capable, not because we are young, but because we have what it takes to make a difference. Age is just a denominator in this entire conversation. So that means that we need to be proactive in leadership, in governance, in accountability in the health space, but also policymakers, decision makers who are not youth need to invest in these spaces that enable us as young people to be at the fore of decision making. The second thing that I want to highlight that's closely linked to that is that we need instruments that encourage this collaboration between youth and policymakers, of course, encouraging accountability. And I'll give an example of a scorecard that we've developed at Wyatt. Most of you might have heard about it. It's a meaningful youth engagement scorecard. We have piloted this with policymakers in different counties here in Kenya. And what's really nice about this scorecard is that we track how young people are being engaged and involved in policy processes. So if, say, a county is developing an SRH policy, then policymakers and the youth track, were the youth invited on time? Were they provided with all documents for them to read ahead of time? Were their views taken into consideration? But what's more exciting is that the youth are also put to account. So the youth are also measured in terms of participation by policymakers. Did the youth come on time? Did the youth come well prepared for this policy process? Were they engaged? So it's a two-way engagement between young people and policymakers. So I hope this is something that the team can also take forward in this summit. The third one is on youth-led accountability. And I always say we cannot just make commitments as young people, as policymakers, if we do not have a framework for accountability. So one of the things that we really need to prioritize, even in the health space, is providing accountability mechanisms so that as young people, we can keep each other accountable, we can keep policymakers accountable, we can keep partners and NGOs accountable to the things that they've committed to do. And as Wyatt Youth in Action, if this will be of benefit to this team, we are now developing the first Pan-African digital knowledge hub, which will not just provide resources on SRH to young people in sub-Saharan Africa, but will also provide a platform for social accountability for the youth. So it will be a digital platform, and the youth can keep policymakers accountable to commitments around ICPD plus 25 for those of you who are in the SRH space, and really commitments focusing on the SDG, last decade of action. So this will be launched later next month. And of course, I can share the details with you, David, to share with your network. So accountability is key, and it's one of the things that we are also fostering in our work. The fourth and the last thing is about COVID-19. The fact that young people are bearing the biggest brunt, if you ask me, of the effects of COVID-19. How do we build back better? We have seen youth really being affected, not having access to routine services, the rising cases of unemployment, increased sexual and gender-based violence. A study that we carried out earlier this year with the youth showed that the pandemic was taking a toll on the mental health of young people. Up to 30% at that time were living in fear, living in stress. Around 50% of them had lost their jobs. So even as we talk about health, we need to talk about building back better. How are young people being supported to recover from the effects of the pandemic? One of the things we've done is to try and feature young people who are trying to make a difference in this time of the crisis, because it's really inspiring to see youth who are coming out to support other young people, whether they're doing innovation, whether they're activists or volunteers. So if any of you has interesting stories of young people who are making a difference, we've been carrying out our campaign known as Champion Square Ground, featuring and amplifying voices and efforts of youth organizations who are contributing to build back better, who are supporting the recovery of health systems, and also supporting their fellow young people at grassroots level. Then, of course, because right now many young people are trying to get opportunities, for those of you who'd like to feature opportunities, we have developed an info site, a COVID-19 info site on the Wyatt Movement website. It has a platform for organizations to post opportunities, whether they're job opportunities or opportunities for counseling for those who are undergoing mental stress at this time. So it has an option for opportunities, and you can get to see what's happening in the space. And of course, resources around COVID-19. So for COVID-19, I think we all need to work together. We don't have the solutions, but the fact remains that as young people, we have the power to contribute to the recovery of economies and also supporting young people to deal with the effects of the pandemic. So in conclusion, David, I really want to say that this is an excellent summit. The youth have what it takes to make a difference in this world. We need to rise up. We are a force to reckon with. So we can't just sit and wait for opportunities to be given to us. We need to rise up. We need to participate in leadership, not because of our age, but because we are capable. We need to work with policymakers in these spaces. We need to keep them accountable, and we need to support each other to deal with the current pandemic. So with those few remarks, I want to wish you all a very fruitful summit. Over to you, David.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Mayuba. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for the wonderful speech that you've given us. And one of the things that has stood out for me is the fact of social accountability. I think this is an aspect that is starting to grow, and we are starting to recognize its importance as we are trying to build the society. And also, I'm really amazed by the activities that you guys are creating for the youth to actually get out there and be recognized. And that is really something to admire. I will probably ask the audience, does anyone have a question? If you have a question, please, you can unmute your mic or you can send it to the chat box where I can read it out. Okay, as we're waiting for anyone else to ask a question, maybe I could ask mine. Evelyn, what are some of the measures that you're using to actually implement social accountability in your organization that the youth can mirror or copy to also try and apply the same concept as they are starting off their organizations? What are some of the things that or features that you're using for social accountability in your organization?
A great question. Social accountability is an important conversation because the only way in which we can achieve commitments that we make, whether globally, regionally, even at grassroots level, is by keeping each other accountable and involving citizens in the entire conversation. Social accountability, however, doesn't happen in a vacuum. You need an environment where policymakers and decision makers actually allow citizens and including young people, to participate in the accountability conversation. And in many spaces or in many countries where they have dictators, accountability never works. So having an environment and policymakers who appreciate accountability is one of the key success factors for you as a young person to be able to carry out accountability. And some of these things are beyond our control. But luckily enough, I think in Kenya, most of our systems, the constitution itself has given provisions for public participation. So the environment appreciates and gives us an opportunity to participate in accountability. Then of course, there's the issue of transparency, where you actually need to know what's happening in the policy space for you to even keep people accountable, because you can't keep someone accountable for something that you don't know they're supposed to do. So one of the things that I want to encourage the young people is to be conversant with policy processes, with commitments being made, with what our rights are. Then in that way, you'll be able to effectively participate in accountability. So information and knowledge is a key thing, and it's one of the things we've been trying to emphasize when we work with young people. So what we've done right now is to develop a social accountability framework. We actually developed it last year during ICPD Plus 25 Summit. really trying to explain to young people, this is what accountability is all about. These are some of the successful models that have been used in accountability. So that framework is what we are now using, and what I previously talked about when I mentioned that we're developing this Pan-African digital platform. It will have a specific aspect of accountability, where we'll now be implementing this framework around ensuring that young people can keep policymakers accountable for commitments that they made last year during ICPD Plus 25 and other commitments around the SDGs, but really focusing on sexual and reproductive health. So I can share the link. I can share the link to the caravan, because this site will be launched not next month, this month actually, in like 3 weeks time. So you can keep checking. We'll have uploaded the social accountability framework there, and we'll be launching this platform for youth to participate through digital platforms in accountability aspects. I hope that answers your question. Over.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And yeah, we're really looking forward to looking at the framework that you have, because as a youth, yes, I hear social accountability so much, but then I don't really know how to proceed to actually implement it in the spaces that I am in. The next question, someone just sent it in. How does your organization work towards promoting knowledge of policies among the youth? Because there's always a saying, if you want to hide something, hide it between a book, because we won't read it. But how are you navigating through that barrier so that you can at least empower the youth who are within your spaces?
That's very interesting. I just laughed when you said that, because it's true. Really learning and taking time to read and study issues related to policy is not easy. Even in schools, we are not taught about policy work. We're not taught about advocacy. Advocacy is a skill that we come to learn much later. And so one of the things and the key pillars of our work is skills and capacity strengthening. And what we did with the youth in Kenya is to develop a curriculum for advocacy. And I'll share the link on the chat when I'm through with my speech. But it's really about ensuring that young people understand the advocacy process, identifying the problems in their communities, identifying how policy change can lead to sustainable development and a sustainable way of addressing these challenges in the communities, identifying which policy maker needs to make that decision, coming up with a whole advocacy strategy, and executing it. So it has also modules on budget advocacy, quite a lot. I'm going to share the link. And the good news is that the curriculum is now open source. So anyone, any young person, as long as you have a mobile phone, you can log on to the system, you register, and you start off the modules. I have to say that online learning is not easy. So just like you said, really studying and understanding these things, it's not easy. So it takes time, it needs dedication. And what we've seen being very useful is learning advocacy or policy processes can only be effective if you're practicing it every day. So don't just learn and keep the knowledge to yourself, but if every day you're interacting with policymakers, every day you're interacting with fellow youth advocates, you'll find the lessons and the modules more useful, more beneficial, because then you start having, moments of realization that, oh, this is something that I learned in the advocacy module, and I'm actually seeing it with policymakers. So the things that you may find obvious, like for a policymaker, you need to look at their interests, what their personal life looks like before you actually approach them for policy advocacy. These things are in the curriculum. It makes much more sense when you're living it every day and doing advocacy every day for you to benefit from the knowledge that we have. In addition to that, we have a whole host of resources on our website. So if you go to our website, you'll see a page for resources. We also have newsletters. You can try and read through and get some tips on advocacy work. we've also featured the counties where we have in-person work, 5 counties. You can read through their case studies and also get some tips on how to engage with policymakers, how to understand the policy space, and how to really carry out advocacy effectively. Over.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'll move to our last set of questions. I don't know if you have a paper just close by. It's 3 of them. It would be better if I read them out, then you note them down. Okay, so I think some of them you've answered, but I'll just repeat. How can one be a Y Act advocate? That's the first question. The second one is, how does Y Act support youth-based CBOs in implementing its objectives? And then the third one, how can we interact with Y Act in case of any partnerships? Have you noted all of them down?
Yes, I have.
Okay, maybe just the last one.
Okay, sure.
Which youth groups do you support in your network, and what are the requirements?
All right, so really good to see these interests in being part of Y Act and working with our team. So for joining our network, what you need to do is just click on the website link that I've shared on the chat. You'll see there's a tab written there, Join the Movement. So we have advocacy work at 2 levels. There's the national work, which is based on this digital movement. So when you join the movement, you'll be getting monthly newsletters that have resources. You can access also the curriculum. You'll see the links there and really be up to date with any opportunities. Like recently, we partnered with Ajira digital platform. I don't know for those of you who are here whether you know about Ajira. So they have this program where they train young people on earning an income through digital platforms, doing research, transcription, data analysis. So we partnered with them and they gave us an opportunity to sign up 100 young people for a pilot program and then scale up next year. So we actually wrote to the youth on our network, those who are registered on Y Act Movement, and asked them, would you want to gain skills on research, data, join the platform? And we got over 200 signups and they'll be going through that training. So those are some of the benefits of being part of our network. Whenever there are opportunities, you'll be the first ones to get to know about these opportunities via email. So click on the website, join the movement so that you can be getting updates on email. That's closely linked with the third question on how to interact with Y Act. Being a member of the movement is like the easiest way, so that then you always get information and any useful updates around youth advocacy or opportunities. Then for question 2 and 4, I'll answer them concurrently because they're closely related. Youth-based CBOs and how we support youth groups and requirements. So I said our work is at 2 levels. There's the national work, which is digital focused. Then there's the county work, which is focused on in-person support. For the county work, we have in-person activities in 5 counties representing different regions. So for the urban regions, we're in Nairobi, coastal region, we're in Kilifi. For the rural regions, we're in Kakamega. For the pastoral regions, we're in Samburu. And we recently added Kisumu County because of the UHC focus. And in these counties, what we've done is set up youth coalitions. So we have like a coalition of about 10 youth organizations, but we only give grants to 2 organizations that are leading the coalition. The organizations are selected on a competitive basis. So like the first selection we did, the second selection we did was last year, which will run for the next 2 years. So we competitively selected 2 organizations in these 5 counties. And these 2 organizations don't work alone. They're supposed to lead the coalition of youth and implement and execute the advocacy strategy that has been implemented in the coalition. We've recently started out our work in Bungoma, and we've done the same process. We put out a call for the youth advocates in Bungoma. And the first thing we always do by this is to send out a call to the youth who are registered on the platform. So if it's youth from Bungoma, they all got the call for proposals to participate. And we've closed that now. So as of now, we are not doing any more selections, but in case we get other phases of work in different counties, the youth who are registered on our platform from that county will receive information on whether we'll be selecting organizations. But as of now, we are working in those now 6 counties for the next year or so. But I encourage all of you to join the movement so that you get updates on the national advocacy work and whenever opportunities come up for the county work. Over.